We'll start. So, when I told you that we were done with David and Solomon, you probably thought that we were done with David and Solomon, because we really did finish the book of Samuel, and we aren't reading about Solomon's reign since we're not reading the book of Kings. But we're not done with them, because today we're talking about David's great-grandmother. So, like I wrote to you last week, this really is a nice story. It's and nice story and beautifully written. But I think when you read it, you could see that the level of writing is not the same as what we've been used to. Not in terms of the beauty of the writing, but in terms of when you compare it to the books of the Torah we read, Judges, Samuel, and the writing really is pretty, and it's thoughtful, and of course we love Ruth, and so it's an enjoyable book, but the characters are flat. Okay? The character development is not what we've been. It's not up to what we've seen, even if you compare it to short stories, like similarly short stories, like just a few chapters, like the story of Samson or the story of Yiftach. Okay, the characters are thinner here. You know, they're more. So the book. Structurally, the book begins by setting the story chronologically. Okay? It says, in the days when judges judged. Okay, so a clear placing of this. It tells us this happened in the book of Judges, basically, in that period. The book right before David's book. Okay, the period right before David's book, and the book that, as you remember, kept telling us repeatedly, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Okay, so this story happened then, and it'll be clear by the end of it why it's important that it's there. That's, again, David's family history. And also, well, again, with the establishment of the monarchy after the era of the judges judging. And unlike the book of Samuel, which is long and complicated, with complicated characters, the book of Ruth is short and simple, with simple characters. And again, the structure is, again, very simple, very clear. Chapter 1 is so 4 chapters. Chapter 1 is the intro, just introduces the characters and their problem. Then 2 middle chapters in which the story actually happens. Chapter 2, Boaz and Ruth meet in the field, in the open, in public, in the daytime. Chapter 3, Boaz and Ruth meet again in the hayloft, privately, behind closed doors, alone, unseen, at night, in bed, at night. And then chapter 4 is a conclusion, an epilogue, because it resolves the character's problems from chapter 1, and it reveals the significance of this story, which is what is the significance of the story? Like, who cares about this little love story? Well, why is this little pastoral love affair even in the Bible?
Seems like the line of David's at stake.
Right. Clearly, we don't know the purpose until the last few verses. Okay? Oh, this beautiful love story that you might be scratching your head about, like, who cares? This was David's great-grandmother. Okay? So the question is, again, there's a lot of competition to get into the Bible. Okay? So what did the editor, the compiler of the compilers of the Bible, why did they need this story in the Bible? Why did they think that we needed to read? Like, How does knowing the story of David's great-grandmother help? Why is it necessary?
She's a Moabite.
Pardon?
She's from Moab.
Right. But look, if that's not something to be proud of, so why?
Right. That's complicated.
Right. Why bring it up? Like if he's a Moabite, why tell people? If he's got Moabite blood.
Guess it would suggest a different kind of kinship with. I mean, they're already cousins.
You mean the peoples?
Right, from way back.
The children of Israel and the. Yeah.
But this is a new kind of connection between Moab and Israel.
Very much so. Take a look at. Jump to 1 Samuel chapter 22, the beginning of the chapter.
Samuel 22. Got it.
How come I
David
don't
departed.
have Samuel 22. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay. So what do you? So again, the story of David. David's on the run. Okay. So David's on the run, and
went from there to Mizpeh of Moab.
Mitzpah, of Moab.
Mizpah. And he said to the king of Moab, "Let my father and my mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me."
Right.
So they led him to the king of Moab, and they stayed with him.
So he's on the run from Saul, and he goes to Moab, and he asks the king of Moab to keep his parents there, to safeguard them from Saul's troops. Why would he do that? Like what how to account for that?
So it'd be Jesse and his wife.
Yeah.
Which would be the grandson of Ruth the Moabite.
Yeah.
And what I guess I don't know or
look, and again, look, up until, so look, the book of Ruth was written probably 300, 400, 500 years after the time of King David. Again, there's debates, and it doesn't really matter for us, but obviously it was written after David, because the author of Ruth tells us about the lineage of David, so clearly it was written after David. So look, when you look at this little tiny anecdote here in Samuel 22, look, who do you go to when you're on the run from the cops? Or when you need a loan desperately? Okay, when clearly David needs a hand, he needs somebody to help him protect his family while he is escaping in the desert. Okay. So when you're on the run from the cops, like later tonight, for example, after you rob a liquor store, who do you go to?
Extended family and friends, I suppose.
Exactly, you go to family. Okay, and who's the only one who will agree to offer such help? Also, only family. Okay, so and again, think of why would the king of Moab risk kind of troubling or risk his relationship with King Saul. King Saul, remember, was a world beater at this time. He defeated everyone in the area, and even the Philistines, but certainly the Moabites and the Ammonites, etc., etc. Okay? So King Saul was a strong king. Why would the king of Moab risk antagonizing him to safeguard some outlaw's parents? Okay? Especially if you notice here in these 4 verses at the beginning of chapter 22, David offers the king of Moab nothing for this service. He says, if you give me, he doesn't say, if you protect my parents, if you hold my parents, I'll pay you whatever, gold or land or whatever, something. He asks him, could you please do this for me? And the king does it, the king. Okay? So we already have this kind of, in the book of Samuel, there's no explanation for this. We don't know about David's lineage at this point. We know nothing about him. But this little anecdote actually raises a huge question mark. Why is he going to Moab, and why is the king of Moab agreeing? Okay. Now, take also, jump ahead to 1 Kings chapter 11, verses, again, at the beginning of chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. Okay, this is the section that describes Solomon's idolatries. Later in life, his women, his wives sway his heart, and it describes his different idolatries. Okay, so do you see that, verses 1 through 8? Mm-hmm. Okay, so as you can, as you read through, you might notice that the gods in question are uncommon in the chronicling of Israelite sinfulness, because the go-to idol worship among Israelites, the sinful idolatry among Israelites in the book of Judges and in the book of Kings, are Baal and Ashtoreth, who are the two leading Canaanite gods. Okay. But the author here in the book of Kings, when he's describing Solomon's idolatry, the author emphasizes Solomon's worship of the Transjordan gods of the Moabites and the Ammonites, okay, the two peoples that descended from Lot's incest. So yes, he also commits this sin with regard to Canaanite gods, but these Transjordan gods, the gods of the Moabites, is emphasized as his. It seems to be his main sin, main idolatry, main target. Okay. So this one is more speculative than the bit about David hiding his parents in Moab, but there seems to be evidence that David had a lineage problem. Okay, and in this respect, I told you that when we get to know David, we don't know anything about his lineage. Okay, the only reason we have to speculate about it is that that bit about David hiding his parents in Moab. Okay? Otherwise, we wouldn't think to think about it. But it is striking that we don't know anything about this king, about this David. It's very odd, because look, we have a genealogy for Abraham, we have a genealogy for Moses, we have genealogies for some of the judges. We definitely have a genealogy for Samuel. We have a genealogy for Saul, the lesser king. But we don't have a genealogy for David and Solomon, the two greatest kings. Okay, so it's odd. Okay? And it suggests that David had a PR problem, and this is something that kind of Jewish sages kind of pointed to in the post-biblical era. So it might be that David had this PR problem with regard to a tainted lineage that the book of Ruth aims to address and solve. In the sense that, yes, David had Moabite blood. Yes, his great-grandmother was a Moabite. But what a woman. Okay, she's more righteous and more charitable, what's called the tzaddiket, than any of us Israelites reading about David and kind of wondering about his lineage. Okay? She's more devoted to the nation than any of us. Okay? Because Ruth joined the Israelite family and wouldn't abandon it no matter the hardship. Again, those famous words that she says to Naomi, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Where your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And where you die, I will die. Okay, and buried, etc. However she phrases it, may God do this to me, if anything but death shall part shall part you and me. Okay? So we come, as we read the story, we come to feel great affection and admiration for Ruth when she's just this Moabite woman. Okay, in chapters 1, 2, 3. Okay, before we learn of her genealogical importance at the end of the story. Okay, we see that Ruth is special when she's just a character, just a woman. Okay. By the time the author will connect her for us to David, we're already smitten. Okay, we already love her. And then when we're told in chapter 4 that she's David's grandmother, we gladly take her into our family as a Jewess of good standing. Okay, we're honored to have her. Okay, so meaning that this Moabite woman is not in fact a stain on David's lineage, but a point in his favor. Okay, so this might explain what this book is even doing in the Bible. Like, who cares about a little love story? We care because it's David's great-grandmother. But when you think of why write this book and why was it important enough to get in the Bible ahead of other books, it might address some problem that David had and solve it. Okay, so I said that chapter 1 introduces the characters and their problem. So what is Naomi's and Ruth's problem that is resolved by the end of the story?
The men die. They're without men.
Right. Okay, they're childless. Well, so they're widows, which is bad enough, but childless, exactly. Okay? Childless widows are the most alone and helpless people in society, in biblical society. Okay? These are women who do not have a family to which they belong. Okay? They're women without a protector to safeguard them, without a provider to feed them. Okay? So the husband is a protector and a provider for women. And a male son is a Social Security and Medicare program for old age. Okay? And so you can see this, and you can see that this is the problem. It's spelled out at the very end. If you look at chapter 4, verses 13 to 15, this is after everything is resolved and happy ending. Because when Ruth has a son, the women of the town celebrate the resolution of Naomi's problem when they tell her, "May this son restore your life and sustain you in your older age," or however it's phrased. Okay. So that is again, people at the time, in our society, a childless woman or a childless widow, we might feel bad for her, but she's not destined for destitution and death. Okay? Those audiences would understand. But in the happy ending, it's spelled out for us. Okay? The sword against their throat was removed because Ruth had a son that can sustain Ruth and Naomi in their old age. Also in chapter 1. So you don't speak Hebrew, but again, Hebrew readers of this original text would have seen immediately that the characters, and this is again goes into what we were saying about the fact that the characters are thin. Okay, they're not. So all the characters in this book are remarkably good and kind and generous. And and their characterization is conveyed through their names, their Hebrew names. So, actually, before we get to the names, just to show you the overwhelming kindness of all the characters, can you think of the worst characters in this book? Like who? If I asked you to name me the worst characters in this book, who would you pick?
That are given names?
Mm.
Like, is there's like the
Oh,
like, aren't there other
and
people like
yeah.
running around like taking stuff? Like when she's forced to beg, there's other people that are kind of dangerous.
Oh yeah, no, I meant characters, like actual characters who are in the book. People, either people with names or people with speaking roles, or not the extras.
Or
Orpah, yeah.
and Boaz is a little complicated.
Yeah. No, but look,
He's not initially very generous, or he is. Yeah,
no,
that's
he's
unfair.
remarkably generous. Yeah.
But he doesn't.
Yeah.
He
I mean,
he did.
Oh, go ahead.
He gives her a little bit at first. I suppose you could read it in a way where he could have given her more at first.
No, he gives her water, he invites her to his table and feeds her, and then he gives instructions to his men to let her collect not only where it's allowed, but also where it's not allowed, and to pretend to drop more, what is it called? What do you call the stalks? Wheat stalks, to pretend to drop them and let her pick them up. And she's just some beggar woman, and a Moabite, to boot.
But he knows she's from family, like that whole Levirate marriage
Yeah.
issue. Like he could, but he's
Yeah, but he's not obligated. We'll get to the Levirate marriage, but he's not obligated to marry her because he's not a brother. He's not her brother-in-law. Okay, but going back to the bad characters, the worst characters you can think of in this book are Orpah and that male relative at the very end of the book who
named guy,
who's got first
Redeemer.
Dibs. Pardon? The Redeemer, the first Redeemer, who's got first dibs on marrying Ruth.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so these are the worst characters, and they're not at all bad. Okay, both of them want to do the right thing, and they try to do the right thing. It's just that they're not saintly. There you go, I said it. So the man we'll discuss later, but here in chapter 1, you see with Orpah, she stays with Naomi just like Ruth does, despite Naomi asking her to return to her mother's house. Okay? Orpah says no. Okay, I won't leave. She won't leave Naomi to her fate. Only after Naomi asks her to leave a second time does she do it, and she cries, and she clearly doesn't want to, but she does it. Okay, so again, she's not bad. She's just not as saintly as Ruth. Okay, every other character we'll meet is again, even she's kind. Even she wants to do the right thing. Okay, so that's the low bar. Everyone else is, again, remarkably kind and generous to one another, to the other characters. And by the way, Orpah, you might not know this. Orpah in this story is where Oprah got her name from.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the letter reversal was a spelling error in Oprah's birth certificate. So that's how Oprah got her name. And it makes you wonder, why name your daughter after the other character, the less, but no. So, speaking of Oprah, the names. So, I told you that the Hebrew names of the characters are characterizations of the different individuals. Characterizations. So both sons, who get sick and die, their names are Machlon and Kilion, from the words sickness and the words expiration, death. Okay, so it's like if in English we called one son diseased and the other son deathly. Okay. The wife who turns back, the wife who turns her back on Naomi and goes back to her mother's house, is named Orpah, after the word orif, for the back of the neck. Okay, so the woman who turns her back is named back, and the heroine, the wife who sticks with Naomi, is named Ruth. In Hebrew, it's Ruth, which comes from reut, which is friendship. Okay, so the characters, the names are the character traits, or the representations of the role of that person. The role of this person is to get sick and die. These two people. The role of this person is to turn her back. The role of this person is to be a true friend. Okay. And like I said, Ruth earns this appellation, friendship, reut, with those famous words to Naomi in chapter 1, verses 16, 17. Okay. Let me just get it here on the screen so I can read it. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you, and to return from following after you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May God do so to me and more, if anything but death parts thee and me." Okay, so Ruth, it's a very inspiring statement for an audience who understands what Ruth is committing herself to by doing this, not going back to her mother's house, to her own people, but sticking with this childless widow as a childless widow herself. Okay, she's committing herself to a life of hardship and poverty and sorrow out of friendship and camaraderie with Naomi. Okay, she could salvage her life by returning to her people and her family, but she sticks with Naomi. Okay, and it's as, look, these words are like a marriage vow. Okay, it's as if she's married to Naomi. Okay, it's like the words that a wife vows to her husband. Okay, to go with him wherever he goes, to lie where he lies, to live where he lives, to die and be buried where he dies and is buried. Your people, your family, will be my family, my people. Your God will be my God. That's what happens to every non-Israelite woman who marries an Israelite. Again, we talked about this before, how for men there's a conversion ritual. Okay? For women there is no conversion. When you marry an Israelite, you join the families, you join his family, and you join the cult, the worship of his God. Okay, so what she's telling Naomi is exactly what a wife tells her groom. Okay, I will follow you, I will be with you, I will become part of your family will be my family, your God will be my God. Till death do us part. Okay. So in any case, so we see the kindness and graciousness from Ruth to Naomi, from Orpah to Naomi. Later on, we'll see the kindness of Ruth towards Boaz and Boaz towards Ruth. But how about Naomi? How is she kind and gracious?
She tells her daughters-in-law to go, trying to look out for their interests at her expense.
Right, because obviously she could use the company and the extra labor, the assistance of two young, healthy women, but she is thinking what's good for them. Okay? She's trying to save them from the miserable fate that she sees in her own future. Okay? So she's saying, instead of being poor widows in a strange land, go back to your families and be poor widows among your own people where your families can take care of you. Okay? And later Ruth continues with the kindness and caring towards Ruth because she's trying to be a matchmaker. Okay? She's trying to save Ruth at the beginning of the book, and then she's trying to save Ruth again in chapter 2 by trying to find her husband so that Ruth won't have that fate. Now, to understand what happens next with regard to the matchmaking plan and Ruth's conduct, so the original plan and Ruth's actual conduct and Boaz's conduct, I want to explain this bit about Levirate marriage, about Jewish law regarding childless widows. So, because it'll become very important to us at the very, very end of the story. If a man dies before he had a chance to produce children, and before he had a chance to perpetuate his name and bequeath his land to his children, to his child, then the dead man's brother is expected to marry that woman, the widow, and stand in and be a stand-in for the dead, for the dead brother, for the dead man. Okay, so the dead man's brother takes responsibility to care for the dead man's widow, and he takes over the dead man's property. In this case, it's a field. Okay. And according to the law, the first child produced by this marriage, by this Levirate, it's called the Levirate marriage, or Yibum in Hebrew, the first child produced by this marriage of the brother and the widow will have the dead man's name and will inherit the property of the dead man. Okay, and that way the dead man's line is preserved and the dead man's property is preserved within the family. Okay, so it provides it's a perfect solution, again, in a society that doesn't have state welfare programs, etc., etc. It provides the widow with a family, shelter, food, and protection, meaning a husband. Okay. It provides the dead man with the opportunity to perpetuate his name and his land. And it provides the brother, the next of kin, an opportunity to A, to be a mensch, to do the right thing. B, to get a wife for free, a wife that he does not have to pay a bride price for. And C, get some land out of it too. Get his brother property as a caretaker.
So if there is a first son, though, who ends up with the land? Not the brother, right?
The son, yeah.
So the brother's...
It might also, I'm not clear about this, it might also be the daughter. So if the first child is a daughter, so what I don't know about this, the laws regarding Levirate marriage, is if there's a son, then it's easy. Okay? The son gets the dead man's name and title to the land. I'm assuming when he comes of age. If the first, and then the other children that come from this marriage are the brothers already. Okay. If, however, there's a daughter, it's a question. It's a question for me. I'm sure it's settled in Jewish law. I just don't know the answer. I don't know if you keep on having babies and then the first son is the one that counts, gets the name and gets the land, or if the first child, male or female, can inherit, because in Jewish law, if there are only daughters and no sons, the daughters can inherit. So it might be, if the brother is simply stepping in for the dead man and produces a daughter, then okay, then that's the child. And she is treated like an only child in a normal family, which means that she inherits.
So what if there is no child?
Well, if there is no child, then all you
The,
have
la-
is the taking care of the wife, of the widow,
but would the land go to,
to the brother.
so the brother, like if he's only looking out for his own wealth, it's in his best interest for her not to have a child.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And does that like Genesis 38 comes to mind with Onan, like
Yeah.
Tamar, Judah, and
Yeah.
then there's the spilling of the
Well,
seed.
no, but he
Would
does
it,
not marry her because
right, but
the brother would need to marry her and not have sex with her. Okay,
so it
and
wouldn't.
then this scenario would come about as you say.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So he'd get the land, but not have to give it up in 20 years when the child comes of age. Okay. Look, but in this respect also, look, you have to think of it. There are two things that would work against your Machiavellian approach to this. First of all, doing this brings honor on the man, on the younger brother, or on the surviving brother. Number one. Number two, the land stays within the clan. Okay, so if I marry my dead brother's widow and produce a son, I produce this son and I'm giving him land, just like I give land to my other son, my own son. I mean, well, this is my son. It's just, again, legally. Okay. But in any case, but with Onan, he refused to marry her, and which is why we think so ill of him.
Right. And then, well, then there's that whole spill the seed thing, which means he didn't want her to conceive, regardless of the marital status at the time.
Yeah, but again, he refused to marry her anyway. So that, so let's look at it, because we will look at that at the end, because the author tells us to. The author tells us to compare that story to this. So when we read it, let's keep an eye on this exact thing, on the spilling the seed. Okay. Okay. So in terms of Levirate marriage, what happens here in Ruth is not technically a Levirate marriage, because Boaz is not Ruth's brother-in-law. He's a more distant next of kin. Okay, simply because there is no brother here. Both brothers died. Okay. So the applicable custom is for the next of kin to take over the dead man's land, so it'll stay in the family, in the clan. Okay? But again, it's not an obligation like it is for a brother. Okay? A brother is compelled, and if he shirks it, he has to go through this ceremony, which is, again, it shames him if he chooses not to step up for his brother. Okay. In any case, in this story, Naomi's field has been sold by her late husband. Therefore, the next of kin, that other man, or Boaz, if that other man doesn't want to do it, the next of kin is expected to, or is given the opportunity to buy that land, to redeem it, hence the use of that word all the time. And by redeeming it, he thus returns the field to the possession of the family or the clan. Okay, so Naomi's husband sold it, and now it left the clan. Okay? But the Redeemer has the right, the opportunity to buy it back and bring it back into the family. Okay? And this person, the title, the legal title of what he's doing by buying the field and bringing it back to the family, is a redeemer, to redeem this land that left through sale. Okay? In Hebrew, it's goel. And this is why Naomi tells Ruth, when she tells her about that she met this guy Boaz, Naomi tells her that Boaz is family to us and is one of our redeemers. Okay, so it's not some sort of vague title, oh, he can save us. Okay? It's a legal term that clarifies he is one of the next of kin who's on the list of people who can redeem us. Meaning, take the field, take you. And kind of step in for the dead brother or the dead husband. Okay. So any questions about these laws? Okay, good, because I don't know anything else. Okay, now one other thing that's essential. Actually, could you cover your screen? I just want to share the screen for a second. No. There we go. See it? The women? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
So the other law that's central to understanding the story is the Jewish law regarding gleaning. Okay. So in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Jewish farmers are instructed to leave the edge of their field, the corner of their fields unharvested. Okay, because that edge, it's called pe'ah in Hebrew, is reserved for the poor to come and collect produce, whether it's fruits from the trees or wheat stalks, as it is here. So that's one social welfare law about, again, leaving the edge or the corner unharvested for the poor. And the second is that when you harvest the crop, whatever the crop is, the Torah instructs the farmer not to pick up the produce that dropped on the ground. Everything that dropped on the ground is supposed to be left there, because that too is reserved for the poor to glean, to collect. Okay, so again, so it's welfare legislation, the edge and the gleaning. In Hebrew, it's pe'ah veleket. Okay? These are welfare programs for the poor, again, the orphans, the widows, the destitute. Okay? And as you can see from this image, it's hard work. Okay? A lot of labor for very little yield. Okay? You walk around all day collecting a stalk here, seeds that fell here and there, bent over all day collecting for very little, and with a lot of competition. Okay, so that's in terms of the context. So you can reveal yourself once again. So in chapter 2, we're told that there's this other character, that we're told that Boaz exists, and that he's a relative of Naomi's through her deceased husband Elimelech. Okay. And so we're told that as Ruth went to gather grain that's left behind after the reapers, again collecting like these women in this picture, she happened to gather in Boaz's field. Okay, and we're told then that this Boaz is a relative. Okay. Now the author tells us explicitly that this was a coincidence. Okay, she did not aim to go to Boaz. And God even did not direct her to go to Boaz. Okay, it says it just so happened that she went, that she gathered in Boaz's field. Okay. However, you know, if you consider when it's explained to us that he's family, when we're told that he's family, we can actually think that this is not a huge coincidence. Okay, we know that Naomi and Ruth went back to Bethlehem. where Naomi and her husband, when Elimelech, are from. Okay, so of course it's not a coincidence. It's not a crazy coincidence that her husband has relatives in that area. In fact, we should expect it. And second, okay, so number one, okay, so she gathers, she gleans wheat, grain in fields, and she happens to be in a place that's of somebody within the clan. But also, the text definitely allows the possibility that Ruth gathered grain in a number of fields. Okay, you gather here in the morning, you have it here at midday, you have gather over there late in the day. So of all the fields that she gleaned in, okay, it doesn't stretch stretch credulity to think that she would happen upon somebody who is a relative of Naomi's, given the fact that she's from here. Naomi is from here. This is where she's from here. So it's not a monumental coincidence that Boaz happens to be a relative. What is a remarkable coincidence is that Boaz noticed Ruth among all the women, all the poor women gleaning in the fields. And not only did he notice her, he was attracted to her. Okay? That is not, for a rich man, the owner who's got so many things, and so many of these poor women would notice this one and would be interested in her. Okay? So he notices her. He asks, who is this? He's told. And when he finds out that she's not taken, that she's not a married woman currently, he approaches her and he asks her, please don't go to glean in another man's field. Okay? So he asks her to please stay here and gather in my field. And he offers her protection by telling the men not to touch her, not to harass her or molest her. And he gives her permission to drink from his workers' water when she gets thirsty. And then she asks him, she thanks him for his kindness, and she asks why he's so nice to her, to a foreigner even, she says. And he replies to her again, this is chapter 2, verses 11-12, to explain why. Okay, and so he tells her that he was touched and impressed by her virtue and by the kindness that she showed Naomi. And these are really two very charming or beautiful verses. So I want to ask you what these two verses, again, chapter 2, verses 11-12, actually, could you read to me the translation that you have here? What I want to ask you is what they do to the Jewish reader. Okay, what's the Jewish audience reading this book or hearing this book? What's the author doing by putting these words in Boaz's mouth? But I need to hear first how it's translated for you.
So 11 starts, Boaz said in reply, I have been told all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, and how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have sought refuge.
Perfect. Okay, so it's been told to me what you did for your mother-in-law after your husband's death. You left your father and your mother and your native land, and you went to a people who you did not know before. May God reward you, etc. etc. So, what do you think? What is the author trying to do to the Jewish audience hearing this?
She made a sacrifice for Naomi, and she's now very vulnerable and needs protecting. and is seeking refuge or protection. It makes
Yeah,
you
but
want to protect her.
yeah, but look, but that's
Save her.
true. That's true for a Canaanite listening to these words, you know, or a Moabite or an Egyptian who heard Boaz saying this, and Ruth really did something great here and good for her. But specifically for the Jewish audience, like what is the author? These words remind Jewish readers of something.
Um,
Iconic.
they're coming out of Egypt. No.
Yeah, let me read it to you again. Actually, let me get the actual text. It's been told to me all you've done for your mother-in-law after your husband's death. You left your father and your mother and your native land, and you went to a people that you did not know before.
It sounds like in the beginning of Genesis, why a woman will leave her family and become and cleave to her husband.
That's true
Or
too.
it's her husband. This is why
Right.
man will leave his family.
Yeah, a man would leave his family. That's a good. I didn't think of that. You're right about that. But an even more like a historical character for the Jews. You know, it's Abraham. Lech lecha.
No, left in it.
Go,
Yeah.
leave your homeland, leave your family, leave your father's house, and go to a place you don't know, the place I will show you. And God will reward you. And of course, Abraham, of course, made this crazy and remarkable leap of faith for an actual promise of, you know, that God promised him, again, some sort of reward in exchange for this amazing act of, again, this leap of faith. Okay. Ruth did it without a promise of reward. In fact, she was committing herself to the opposite. She was committing herself to a life of poverty and misery by going with Naomi. Again, a life of a woman without a family, without a home, and a provider and a protector. On top of being foreigner as well, a foreigner. Okay, I'm not saying that she's greater than Abraham, but the author purposefully encourages us to recognize Ruth's virtue and sacrifice in light of Abraham, again, that construction. Leave your land, your family, your father's house, your mother's house in this case, and go to a place that I'll show you. Okay? So in verses 11, 12, the author makes us like and appreciate Ruth even more than we already did in chapter 1. If the audience, again, those Jewish readers in, let's say, 700 BC or so, if they somehow missed what an impressive woman Ruth is, the author helps us be truly impressed with her decency and devotion to family and her voluntary attachment to our God. Okay, this is not her God. She chose to be one of us. And the author helps us be flattered by her binding her fate to our fate, leaving her homeland and her family and her gods, and embarking like Abraham to our land and our people and our God. Now, how about the next two verses? Okay, what are they for? Verses 14, 16.
14 through 16?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What are those? What's the purpose of those chapters? Verses.
It's showing Boaz is being generous to her.
I mean, definitely he's generous, but
maybe interested.
Right. Look, you get the this chapter, chapter 2, introduces us to the romantic interest, okay, to Boaz. Okay, and the author helps us identify a good man. So we already have been introduced to this woman who's got a problem. She's single. She's a poor widow. She's alone in the world. Okay? What she needs, we all understand, is a man. Just like Naomi will identify in a second. Okay? Ruth needs a man. Okay? And in chapter 2, when it introduces Boaz, we get the opportunity to find a man for Ruth, and the author helps us identify a good man for our heroine. A man who's worthy of Ruth, because we always think that Ruth is a woman of high quality. Okay, so we already, before these verses, we already knew Ruth. Okay, and the author did a good job of touching our hearts in his depiction and characterization of Ruth. From her name to everything she does and how she conducts herself. Okay, we like Ruth, we're impressed by her, and we're worried about what will happen to her without a man. Without food, shelter, protection, without children. And now the author makes us like Boaz as well. Okay. When you watch a romantic drama or romantic comedy, you see the very same thing happening. There's a scene. So you start off by getting to know the hero or the heroine. Okay, who is single, or who's in a bad relationship. Okay, and you start caring about that person. Okay, and you realize he is lonely. He needs a girlfriend. Or she is trapped in a bad relationship. She needs a good man rather than this crappy man she's with. Okay? And the next thing that the movie does is it cuts to some other character. A worker at the office, or a neighbor, or somebody sleepless in Seattle. A man across the continent. And you get to identify, okay, that's the man for this woman. Okay? Or no, it's the opposite actually. Sleepless in Seattle is the man, and then we find a woman for him. Okay, but the author, the movie, the director, has a scene where you're introduced to a potential match, potential romantic interest for our character, and the director helps us identify that this is the right match for the lead character. Okay, so in some cases it's simple, where kind of like here, where our lead character is single and lonely, and then we find somebody for them. In more complicated dramas, it'll be you'll be introduced to let's say Jane or Ruth, and then we see that she's with this guy, but the director clarifies to us that this guy is wrong for her. This is not a good relationship. It's not a good match. And then he introduces us in some scene, this scene with Boaz, for example. This is the right guy. This great guy who's off in some other office or some other town or wherever. This is a great guy who matches Jane, and he can offer her exactly what she needs. Okay, so the character doesn't know that she's with the wrong guy, but we, the audience, do, because the author showed us. Okay? And so the point of every romantic drama is about leading the two characters into each other's arms. Okay? You're introduced to the one character, you're introduced to the other character, and then the whole business is us following how they meet up and fall in love. Okay? And so verses 14 and 16 through 16 show us that Boaz matches Ruth in goodness, consideration, gentility, and this kind of generosity of spirit that we saw from Ruth in the previous chapter. Okay. So he has her come over to eat with him and his men in verse 14. Okay, and he invites this beggar woman. Of all the beggar women in the field, he invites this Moabite woman to come and dine with him and his men. And then in the next two verses, more kindness and generosity in secret this time. Okay, without her knowing, he tells his men to let her glean grain, not just from what's left on the ground behind the reapers, but also to collect on the ground among the bundles of stalks that are already collected and stacked. Okay, this is beyond the law, beyond the custom. Okay, this territory, is usually not considered part of what the women, the poor, are allowed to glean. And even further, he tells his men, like I said earlier, to accidentally drop stalks from their bundles so that she could collect them. And all of this results in the text tells us that Ruth collects a great deal of grain for her and Naomi to eat their fill. But it also results in us, the audience, seeing what a great guy Boaz is. Not only is he nice and kind to her face to face, he also takes care to, again, give her charity without making her feel like she's getting charity. Okay? It's giving in secret. And most important, it results, these verses result in the fact that Naomi now will find out, in the next verses, 19 and 20, that Ruth made the acquaintance of a relative, and that this relative was nice, was a good man, and that he was kind to Ruth, that he noticed Ruth. Very important, the third one especially. And the idea of striking a romantic match hatches in Naomi's mind immediately. Just look, we were already there two verses ago, when he invited her to eat with him, when he tore off a piece of bread and gave it to her and dipped it in his hummus or something. Okay, so we already said, okay, that's Tom Hanks. Okay, he'd be a good match for her. And Naomi's just like us. As soon as because we found out 2 verses ago, Naomi just finds out now, and she has the same reaction that we do. Okay, she tells Ruth immediately, Boaz, he's a relative, and one of our redeemers. Again, that legal term. Okay. Now, actually, how is verse 20 translated for you?
Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead." For Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, "The man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen." Okay,
good. Okay, so again, they use the legal term redeem. Good. And this realization takes us, again, that he's one of our redeemers, takes us to the central episode of this whole drama, and that's chapter 3. Okay? The daytime meeting in chapter 2 was nice and sweet, but it's just a setup for the crucial meeting between them, which takes the nighttime meeting. Okay, so the daytime meeting was like the Hallmark movie. Okay? The characters were good, gracious, genteel, very sweet and demure, and chaste. Okay? But here at nighttime, we get to see how virtuous and genteel our heroes will be in the dark, very different, and in private. Okay? So, in chapter 3, when Naomi sends Ruth it gives her instructions to go to the hayloft to engage Boaz. This is in verse 4, chapter 3. Every single word in the Hebrew is a double entendre. Okay, so let me first list to you the words that the Bible uses to convey sex. Okay, and then we'll read together Naomi's instructions. Okay, so the euphemisms for sex, or the sayings for sex, are to lie with someone. Okay, he lay with her is to have sex with her. Same goes for to know someone. Okay, he knew her means that he had sex with her. To come to a woman means to have sex with her. To uncover someone's nakedness, as we saw in the Noah story, Noah and Ham, and in the laws in Leviticus 18, which we discussed also. So also, revealing or uncovering nakedness is a euphemism for sex. So all these things are how the Bible talks about having sex. Now, if you look at verses 3 and 4, I'll read to you how it's written in the Hebrew, because again, I just don't know if they use these terms in your translation. So this is how it's in the Hebrew. So Naomi tells Ruth to bathe, anoint yourself, put on thine dress, and go down to the threshing floor. Do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Okay. And of course, I'm sure you're aware, people in the Bible didn't drink Coca-Cola. Okay? They drank wine. So Naomi is telling her, wait until Boaz has had his food, has had his wine, feels good, relaxed, maybe a little bit buzzed, and kind of ready for what'll come next. Okay, so clean up, bathe, smell good, wear a nice dress, wait and find him, wait till he's not drunk, but drank his wine, and then, again, remember those words I told you, okay? The sex words. Okay. And then Naomi tells her, when he lies, know the place where he lies, and come and uncover his feet and lie, and then he will tell you what you are to do. Okay? So again, lying with someone, knowing someone, uncovering someone, coming to someone, all of these are here. When he lies, know the place where he lies, and come and uncover his feet and lie, and he will tell you what you are to do. Okay? Sex, 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 sex. Okay. Now, do you get why Naomi wants her to uncover his feet? Like,
so is it literally or euphemistic?
No,
like
literally.
so literal.
Do you see what happens later when she does it?
Yeah, he shoots up like that's why I think that's what, like, the response seems severe for having like literally having your feet uncovered.
No, but he responds not immediately. Actually, how is it written for you?
Back there is a woman lying at his feet who stealthily uncovered his feet and lay down in the middle of the night. The man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet.
Ah, okay. So, just a second.
Isn't it that he erupted?
Let me see how the... See, okay, so in verse 8, when does it... Okay, so verse 7, actually here, let me read the translation here. And Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry. Okay, so again, the wine came in and did its job. And he went to lie at the edge of the stack, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And it came to pass at midnight, and the man quaked and was taken around. I mean, taken around. That's not a good translation either. It means that the man. So it was in the middle of the night. The man was awakened and held himself. And here a woman is lying at his feet. Okay. So do you have that in the middle of the night part in verse 8?
It just, in the middle of the night, the man gave a start.
Good. Okay. So it says in verse 8, she came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And so it was in the middle of the night that the man awoke with a start and grabbed himself, he kind of held himself, and found this woman lying at his feet. So it's not immediate. Okay? She did it, and then in the middle of the night he woke up. Okay? So the purpose was for him to be cold. Okay? To uncover, just like you, when you're
I see.
when you're too hot at night, you uncover your feet, and that kind of cools you down.
Okay.
The purpose is to, and in fact, I remember when I was in the army, I used to like dreaming, and so I would leave my feet uncovered, so that I won't sleep really deeply, and that's you dream more when you're not sleeping deeply. But I guess the purpose is to have him wake up, to have him go to sleep, and make him cold, and so that he'll wake up in the middle of the night, find a woman there, and as Naomi says, and then he will tell you what to do. Okay? And Naomi's plan works to a T. Boaz indeed wakes up in the middle of the night in discomfort and shivers, again, grabs himself like we all do when we're cold. And we get it. Okay? Naomi, obviously, when she gave Ruth these instructions, she identified Boaz as a redeemer, as somebody who could be a husband for Ruth. And then she tells her, go sex yourself up, get dressed, get nice and fragrant, go to his bed, uncover his feet so he'll wake up. Again, alone, a man and a woman at night. Okay, so clearly Naomi wants to accomplish this goal of getting these two together, and she wants to exploit Boaz's sex drive to get this good result of marriage for Ruth. Okay, just like most of our romantic dramas. Okay, we want the two characters to get together, to like each other, maybe jump into bed, and the result will be that they'll stay together. Okay, and she ends her instructions, do all these things, uncover his feet, and wait, and then he will tell you what you're to do. Okay, so Naomi is telling Ruth, follow his lead, cooperate with him. Okay, so Naomi expects that Boaz will act as men do, and she tells Ruth to allow it, to accommodate Boaz. When Boaz does what comes naturally to him as a man, go with it, accommodate him. In fact, the reason we read on after this, after Naomi's instructions in verses 2 to 4, is precisely because those verses, those instructions from Naomi, tell us that, hey, there's a sex scene coming up. Okay, so Naomi is basically leading us to believe that, hey, there's going to be sex with, again, there's instructions, with the double entendres laced in all the time. And we're told, hey, a man is going to be with a woman alone in the dark at his feet, alone in the hayloft. Okay, I want to read on. Okay. So we're promised that there's a sex scene coming up, and then we read into chapter 3 and there's no sex. Okay? The sexual vibe that's laid on so thick in verses 2 to 4 continues with Ruth doing it. She's bathing, she's dressing, she's going at night. She finds this man sleeping. She goes to his bed. She uncovers his feet. Okay, so this sexual tension continues to build until Boaz wakes up. Okay. She and when he wakes up, so again, you've got a woman who again does all these things and goes to the man's bed, reveals his feet, and now she is lying there at his bedside, waiting, right next to a sleeping man, alone in the dark, without anyone seeing them. And then he wakes up, and all the sexiness dissipates. And the story becomes chaste and legalistic. And instead of listening to what Boaz tells her to do, as Naomi instructed her to do, Ruth changes the plan. Instead of listening to Boaz and letting Boaz take the lead and following his lead and accommodating him, Ruth takes the lead. She starts talking to Boaz. He asks her, "Who are you?" And she tells him, that she's Ruth and you are my redeemer, and let's get married. Okay, so she's explaining marriage law to him, and she tells him what he should do. Okay? Naomi told her, "You do what he tells you." And what Ruth does is the exact opposite. He tells him what he should do. Okay? She asks him to please marry her because of his legal status as a redeemer. And he follows it. Again, she tells him what he is to do, and he does it. He says that he will do what she tells him to do. Okay? I will do as you say because I know that you are an eshet chayil, a woman of great character. I'll marry you. And at that point he adds more detail. He says, hey, by the way, we have to deal with this legal problem. Okay, so again, we came here for the sex. And instead, she explains to him marriage law. He says, I will live up to my contract. And then he adds, but we have to deal with this legal problem of there being some other guy who's a closer relative to you, so I'll have to get him to bow out first. Okay. So they're, again, making marriage plans and discussing marriage law. And then they go to sleep until dawn, and he sends her away before anyone wakes up, so that nobody will know that she spent the night here. Okay. So, do you think they had sex, and the book just kind of glides over it so as not to tarnish your reputation for us, or is your sense that they had sex here?
My sense was that, if anything, there was like maybe an initial gesture or even an initial act, touching her, and it backed off. So no, that they didn't go through with it.
Because look, we know for certain that they did not have sex before the marriage talk. That is clear. The text clarifies that as soon as he wakes up, the marriage talk begins, and the legal talk begins.
So after that, just when she's laying at his feet till dawn.
Yes. Well, I think he has her come to his bed.
Redeemer, I will do myself. Lie down. He just says lie down till morning.
Yeah.
So she lay with him.
Oh no, you're right. She slept at his feet. You're right. Take it back. So, the only possibility that they had sex is somewhere in verses 13 and 14, when he says, lie down here, he doesn't say lie down here. He says sleep here. Sleeping as in to lie, lishkav, is this euphemism for sex. When he says in verse 13, lini, lalun, is to sleep, not a euphemism, but the act of really sleeping. Okay? So he says, sleep here in the non-double entendre way. And tomorrow, if the guy doesn't redeem you, then I will do it. And and here he says, lie here. This is the one that could be a euphemism, till morning. And then she lay at his feet till morning, and she got up before dawn. Okay, so if they had sex, we know that they could not have had sex before the marriage talk. So maybe the only place they could have had sex is here, between the end of the marriage talk and the dawn when she wakes up. Okay. So again, maybe the marriage talk put them in the mood, but there's no doubt that, again, that all the sexiness of the early part of the night before Boaz woke up is gone. And okay, so the text could allow that maybe they had sex, and the author simply isn't telling it to us. What's your sense of this? Is your sense that they had sex there after the marriage talk?
It's confusing to me why, if you wanted to square away the legalities before going through with any, like, she's obviously asking, or like presenting herself like that's what she's willing and wanting to do. I think, like, why it's just all the double speak, the anointing, like, how do you, and I guess maybe I don't know if she, so what, and we can also infer that he's older.
Yeah.
And so he would, like, traditionally, all things being equal, you wouldn't expect to have a young, attractive Ruth trying to seduce an old Boaz.
Well, look, she is a woman who needs help.
Right.
He's a man who could provide help. But no, look, you're right about all the anointing and dressing up and everything else. But that is, look, up until the moment he wakes up, Ruth follows Naomi's instructions to a T. Mm-hmm. Naomi says, "Get her, wash up,
I see.
And then listen to what he tells you." Up until then, Ruth does exactly what she's told. Okay.
But then when she does depart, she says something like, "Let me under your robe."
Yes, let me take me under your wing. Under your wing, the wing of your coat. Okay, it's a euphemism for marriage, to take wardship over me. Okay? So the reason it seems to me, like you, that they didn't have sex, is that it reads like a story in which the plan, Naomi's plan, did not come to pass. Okay? Again, most notably in this part where Ruth departs dramatically, diametrically from Naomi's plan. Okay? Naomi told Ruth, do A, B, C, and D, and then do as Boaz instructs you to do. Okay? But instead, she does A, B, C, and D, but as soon as Boaz wakes and starts talking, Ruth doesn't give him an opportunity to tell her what to do. Instead, she instructs him what to do, what he should do. And he does as she instructs him. And he says outright in verse 11, "Everything you say, I shall do for you." Okay? So this chapter 3 gives us a plan that is very sexy. And then the plan, the way we read it, the way it seems, is that plan does not come to fruition. Okay? Naomi's plan is flipped on its head. Instead of Ruth listening to what Boaz tells her to do, Ruth tells Boaz what he should do. and he listens to what she tells him. Okay, so we get the impression, at least, that Ruth also flips Naomi's plan of activating Boaz's libido to prompt him to do the right thing. Okay, this seems to be a story about a sexy plan and this Moabite woman who does not follow through on it. Okay, she's chaste and does not follow through on this scandalous plan by Naomi.
She still lay with him until dawn.
Yeah. No, but again, look, it's definitely, and we'll get to this. Boaz is sensitive about a man and a woman together alone in the hayloft at dawn, and maybe even the elders in chapter 4 are kind of questioning what happened there. Boaz wants to remove all doubt by sending her at dawn before anyone can see her, because this is inappropriate. Okay, but the image we get of as the story goes, first of all, we're not told about sex, number one. But also, the structure of the story is a sexy plan that gets turned on its head, which suggests, it seems to me, that not only, she doesn't listen to the man telling her what to do, and we know what men want to do in this situation. She tells him what to do, and he listens to her, which suggests that there was no sex act, as indeed we're not told of any. Okay, so instead of following on Naomi's sexy plan, we have Ruth, the chaste Ruth, initiating a different plan, a fully clothed midnight conversation with Boaz at his bedside about marriage, not sex. Okay. And so the question is, look, we all thought, the question is, why does Ruth change the game plan? Okay, why does she get to the line of scrimmage and then call in an audible? Okay. So, and I think maybe you and I are not as competent to get what's going on here. Because let me ask you, what did you think of Naomi's plan? So I mean, if you saw this in a modern movie, what would you think of the plan?
The plan would be to seduce him so that to either curry favor with him or to seduce him and then ask for marriage, but that might be problematic
look,
too.
That's definitely the plan. Okay, because she says, oh, he's a relative, he's one of our redeemers. He's a marriage prospect. And so we understand, Naomi says he's a marriage prospect, and then how to get there is by dressing up, bathing, perfuming, going to his bedside after he drinks, and inducing him to wake up in the middle of the night. And then let nature take its course. The man will tell you what you're to do. We know what that means. Okay? So my question is, if you saw this as a modern movie, and let's assume it's a modern movie, okay? And this is the plan, and then the woman does everything, but then when it comes to again, at the line of scrimmage, instead of doing what Naomi told her, which is to have sex with this man, or to let him lead her into sex, Ruth doesn't do it. Instead of letting the man's libido lead them towards marriage, she starts with the marriage. She tells him, hey, I want you to marry me. Okay? So, going back to the plan, do you think it's a good plan? Do you think it's a bad plan?
So this is where so I read it when he shot up, or when he noticed that she was there and whatever the action that was, his response made her think that he was more. His response wasn't a he, somehow his response led her to believe that he didn't want her right then. Like it wasn't an erotic response, it was a fear response or something like I'm trying I don't I it's not apparent to me how he wakes up. It's not apparent to me that he wakes up and wants to jump in the sack with her right away and that she's slowing things down. It could be he wakes up and is like terrified and confused and like, what are you doing here?
Well, he says, "Who are you?" Okay, that's
Right.
all we know. He says, "Who are you?" So he wakes up cold,
Hmm.
and there's a woman lying at his feet. And he says, "Who are you?"
Hmm.
And she says, "I'm Ruth, your servant. Please marry
And
me
then and
because you're a relative of mine. You're a redeemer."
well, like in a movie, I'd want to see his facial expressions. Who are you?
Right.
It's me, I'm
Yeah.
Ruth, your handmaid. And if he's still like, or if he's like calm, like it would make all the difference
Right.
about what her
Yeah.
next statement is in her
But
next.
again, you're right. But again, the instructions she got, which up until now she followed to a T.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, it could be that Naomi didn't know Boaz that well, didn't anticipate how Boaz would react, and so that's why the plan got derailed. And Ruth was calling an audible because he saw that things weren't working out because of Boaz's reaction.
Okay.
Or it could be something in Ruth's own mind, I guess, that she was react or that she called an audible because she didn't want to go through with something.
Right. Look. So look, there are two options here, and you're right. It could be that Boaz was scandalized by this woman. He says, "Who are you?" And she said, "I'm not here to have sex with you. I want to marry you. Please marry me. Okay, I'm here for an honorable purpose." That definitely is a possibility that's kind of allowed by the text as it's presented to us. But but it could also be, and again, I think, look, when I asked you about what you thought of the plan, I don't even need to ask you because there are numerous movies that we all consume by the millions that have this plan. Okay, that sex leads to marriage, that infatuation leads to sex, leads to marriage. Okay? Sometimes even the first scene is sex. Okay, they get drunk at a bar, they have sex, and then they get to know each other, and it turns out to have been a happy coincidence, and it ends up with a marriage. Okay, so the plan seems like a good plan to us because we're modern people. Okay? But for those people in the Bible or in any traditional society, this is a very dangerous plan. The plan is dangerous. Okay, not just the execution. Okay, and remember that Ruth has hours between uncovering the feet of the slightly buzzed Boaz and the time he wakes up. Okay, she's just lying there. Okay, she's not asleep. She's waiting for him to wake up. And waiting in the dark, alone at this man's bedside. Again, it's very erotically charged. Okay, and so, look, you and I have to imagine, A, what goes through a woman's head, and B, what goes through a woman's head in a traditional society that's very unlike like our society.
Can I ask, so traditional meaning like this would be a big scandal?
Yeah, traditional, like think of Arab society or
Hmm.
Afghanistan. Okay,
But we were a little bit primed before though when we're talking about the hut and he said that I won't let my men molest you. So it seemed like it was common practice for people who were um, in the position where they were gleaning to be molested.
Oh yeah. Look, I mean, we all know that in a traditional society, rape
Right.
happens. Yeah.
And it
It's
was almost,
it's just that when rape does happen, it is devastating to the woman. Okay,
well,
that's why women are so protected and guarded in traditional societies, so that these things won't happen.
and it seemed what was striking to me is that this was almost expected to happen unless Boaz did something to intervene, like, hey, this is off limits for this girl.
Right, because these women are, again, they're these
Right.
women because they're single or widows or whatever else, they don't have a protector. And if they're harmed, there's nobody who would... Look, do you remember the story of Dinah, the rape of Dinah? When she was raped, her brothers came and exacted revenge. Okay? But a single woman, a widow, doesn't have anyone to exact revenge on her part. So you can molest her without fear of retribution, which is why it's to be expected.
So then I'm trying to understand the scandal in the context. So like they're not prudent, like they don't have these like puritanical kind of idea, or is it just because he was a head of a house being caught with a woman of that status?
No, they do have Puritan. Look, rape happened in Puritan. Look, we know from trial records, people did rape. Okay, but the society, the good people, polite society, view it as terribly as terrible conduct. It's shameful conduct.
That makes sense. The only part that was confusing to me is like the fact that like Boaz had to say like to all these people, at least for this girl, don't do it to her. It was like common practice, understood as like the status quo. Like it wasn't shameful.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of like if you park your Maserati on the street and you tell the teenagers there, don't touch this car. Okay, it's not that I'm saying that go ahead and steal the other cars. Stealing cars is wrong or whatever. But if you touch this car, I will come and who knows do what to you. I care about this car more than the others. It doesn't mean that it's we do it all the time about things that we care about. But again, all the things that you and I think are improper conduct. But if you do it to my sister, much worse.
Makes sense.
So, okay, so when Ruth is lying there at his feet, waiting for him to wake up, what's going through the mind of a woman in that situation? Okay, she's her mother. She's going to have. She is going to this man to present herself to him for sex. Okay, that was the plan. It's clear to you and me and to Naomi and to Ruth. She's sending her to have sex. And again, Ruth is not some teenager who doesn't know what's going on. She's a married woman. She was a married woman. She's had sex. She knows men. She knows what happens in these situations. Okay? So, a woman in the situation who is going to have sex, to present herself for sex with a man in order to get him to do the right thing by her. Okay, what's going on in her mind, do you think, during those hours when she's just at his bedside waiting for him to wake up?
Imagine she'd be scared, like terrified about
what? About what? What?
It could backfire in a lot of different ways, right. And she doesn't know him, so he could be cruel. He could be offended. Right. There's a whole bunch of different ways this could cut south.
Exactly. Look, in the dark there, she's thinking. Okay? She's weighing the pros and cons. And again, even in a modern movie, in a promiscuous society like ours, okay, a woman in that situation is weighing she's waiting for, it's going to happen, he's going to wake up soon. What are the pros and cons? What could happen to me that's good? What could happen to me that's bad? And again, for modern readers in this romantic comedy of a movie that we can make of this, Naomi's plan sounds romantic. Okay? It's exciting and it's hopeful. And again, in a modern romantic movie, it wouldn't be dangerous. Okay, it's a fun plan. It's romantic, and in most cases, but the cons are relatively few. Again, to the woman's pride. If it doesn't work out for some reason, she'll be hurt emotionally, but that's it. Okay? But in a pre-modern society, okay, these pre-modern readers who read this book, I'm sure when they read Naomi's plan, to them it didn't sound like a fun and exciting plan like it is in our romantic comedies. Okay? It was a very dangerous gambit. I mean, it's exciting, it's titillating. Again, sex is coming, so I'm going to read ahead. But they all, the men, the women, they all understood that this is a very dangerous plan. Sex outside of marriage is a very dangerous gamble for a woman in a pre-modern society. Okay, in the Bible, and today, again, like I said, if you think of Afghanistan, let's say, or the Arab world. Okay?
So in my mind, it's as opposed to on the movies where there would be legal recourse for misconduct, or there'd be like somebody to protect her if things went south for her in that scenario, versus there where there would be no recourse for her if things went south.
Look, again, assuming that everything is consensual, which it is, okay? Naomi's plan involves consensual sex. Okay? So the worst that could happen is that he'll have sex with her and that's it, want nothing to do with her after that. That's, in the romantic comedy, again, the worst outcome of this sexy plan is that the guy has sex with her, but then he's a jerk and doesn't respect her in the morning, and the whole marriage part of this exchange doesn't happen. Okay, so she feels used, she feels hurt, and that's it.
Couldn't he also abuse her in the act? Like, I know we said consensual, but there's a whole bunch of ways that can go. That can be.
Yeah, look, if it turns violent, yeah. So you're right.
Like
yeah.
And there would be recourse for somebody in today's like that. Those kind of cases come all the time in the courtroom.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if it turned violent, if it turned beyond sex, yeah. But again, even without that level of criminality or that level of abuse, in a traditional society, again, think of this plan not in a Western romantic comedy, but in a movie taking place in Afghanistan, okay, or in Saudi Arabia. Okay, if you do it, if Ruth goes through with this, if Boaz wakes up and tells her what she is to do, and she does it, and then the man doesn't marry her, then no other man would marry her either. Okay, because she's a loose woman, sleeping outside of marriage. Plus, these societies mete out harsh social and criminal penalties for women with a reputation. Okay, a widow is one thing. A woman who has sex outside of marriage, definitely stoning is a possibility. But even if not, very harsh criminal and social penalties for this kind of misconduct. Okay,
what about
and definitely they'd be cut off from their families. Okay, and if that woman becomes pregnant from this sex act, then forget it. She's in real trouble. Okay, because any woman who has any woman who's not part of a household always had a difficult time feeding herself and protecting herself, okay, because she doesn't have a male provider and protector. But if she's pregnant, then she's in much more dire straits in the late stages of pregnancy and after childbirth, because then she can't even feed herself. Okay, she's likely to starve to death, and she'd certainly have a very hard time feeding that baby after birth. Okay, so sorry, you were going to say.
No, well, there's a contra, but like when Abraham presents Sarah to Pharaoh, like there's still this dynamic going on, but I guess, I mean, it's a little different, but it's still terrifying. I'm thinking that what's going through Sarah's mind and what's going through Naomi's mind might not be too dissimilar.
Through Ruth's mind.
Or I'm sorry, yeah, Ruth's mind.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. That's why what Abraham did was so shameful. That's why we and God are so put off by Abraham, and it's an indictment of his lack of faith. He's so fearful. Excuse me. He's so fearful that he's giving his wife to another man to, again, to ruin her reputation and God knows what. Yeah, it's a terrible thing what Abraham does. Okay, and so again, it's as Ruth is thinking, again, the negative consequences for her are so much greater than the negative consequences for the woman in our Western romantic comedy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, because a bad reputation is a life and death issue for her, for the biblical woman or the Afghan woman.
And I guess we'd also have, if we're going back to Genesis 38 eventually, but the Tamar situation, she's in a precarious situation too when she puts herself with
Right.
Judah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, and she takes the precautions to have evidence. Okay. So when you consider, again, as one of the original readers of this book, again, so put yourself not in our Western society that women have all these opportunities and options. Again, put yourself in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. When you consider the cons of Naomi's plan, you see that this is a crazy, crazy gamble. It gambles everything that Ruth has on Boaz's libido.
After knowing it for a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And she doesn't even know him. Naomi doesn't meet him. She doesn't have a sense of what kind of person he is. Okay? I mean, she does because Ruth told her how kind he was to her and how sweet he was. Okay? But in Naomi's plan, she was counting, it's not on his libido even. Okay? She's not counting on Boaz's libido because she's counting that Boaz will not only be sexually tempted, but that he'll actually fall in love. So much so that he'll marry this woman who is a Moabite and also is not that young and also is not a virgin. Okay? He has to be head over heels to marry this woman. Okay? If all this happens, okay, the sex and the love, then great. Naomi hatched a plan and great. You know, Ruth has found a home, a family, and Naomi has too, as well. Okay? But like you said earlier, what if? What if Boaz finds Ruth's actions to be indecent or obscene? Or what happens if Boaz doesn't want another man's widow? Okay. What happens if Boaz doesn't want to sleep with a Moabite woman? Or what happens, as happens in our romantic comedy, if he's aroused by her but doesn't fall in love with her? Okay, so he sleeps with her tonight, but he's not going to marry her tomorrow morning. Yeah, he's not obligated. Okay? So if any of these things happen, then that's it. You know, Ruth is done for. Yes, she'll now have a reputation of a loose woman, which means that she was in a terrible position before tonight. If Boaz doesn't fall head over heels in love with her, she'll be even in an even worse position, maybe even dead. Okay? So when a biblical woman has hours to think of what might happen here with this man alone at night in his bed, or at his bedside, she thinks not just of the pro in Naomi's plan, on what happens if everything works out perfectly and he has sex with me and falls in love with me and can't live without me. But she also has time to think of all the reckless cons of this plan. And that's why I said that I think ancient readers had an easier time than us understanding why Ruth decides to call an audible at the line of scrimmage, at his bedside. Because look, you and I have to be called upon to think, what is Ruth thinking and what could happen here? Why would she change it? And like you said, obviously it's odd that she changed the plan, and it might be because he woke up and had a gruff, like, who are you? Okay, and maybe that explains it. Okay, I think an ancient reader would have expected a sensible woman to not follow on this idiotic plan, because the pro is such a long shot, and the negatives are so obvious that you have to be kind of reckless to follow through on it. Okay, so if she had time, no, this is crazy. The odds of success are minuscule. Okay, so instead of so apparently during those hours of waiting and thinking and worrying, she changes Naomi's plan now. After following it to a T, now she does something different. And instead of appealing to Boaz's sex drive and hoping that chemistry will make him fall in love with her, she decides on a different appeal. And this plan, the audible, actually works. Okay? Instead of appealing to his sex drive, she appeals to his sense of duty and decency. And it works. He steps up to the plate and does the right thing, if you can believe that. Okay, so of all the crazy things, it turns out that appealing to his sense of duty and honor is a better plan than appealing to his libido. Okay, so, go ahead.
No, that's it. In Law and Justice seems utterly unerotic.
Yeah. Look, again, it was very sexy. Again, the double entendre, the woman bathing and perfuming and going at night and by his bedside. It's very titillating. And then he wakes up and whoosh, all the sex is gone. That's it. It's just law and doing this in front of the elders and we'll get back in a second to the historical significance of this story with the King David connection, but I want to stick with this relationshipy part of the story for a bit longer. Again, beyond the significance, the historical significance of this story, you can see the story as offering some sort of a general insight about men and women. Okay? That men will fulfill women's expectations of them. Okay? If women have high expectations of men, just like Ruth does, then men will live up to them. And if women have low expectations, as Naomi does, then men will live down to these, to these low expectations. Okay, so that's one way of kind of seeing this story. Okay, that you can approach a man low or high. Okay, and men will respond. Men will do what you expect them to do. You expect them to have sex with you, they'll have sex with you. You expect them to marry you, they'll marry you. Okay, so that's one way of kind of reading this as a relationship wisdom. But you can also see this as a story that highlights Boaz as an exceptional man. Okay, so it's not a story about men and women. And if you expect this, they'll give you this. If you expect this, they'll give you this. It could be a story about this amazing man, Boaz, who's uniquely virtuous, that he can live up to Ruth's high expectation, whereas most of us, most men, it's not in us. Most of us really, that Naomi's plan is based on men. Okay, this is how men behave, and this is how to get to a man. But Boaz is such a tzaddik, such a righteous man, that a woman can appeal to his sense of honor, and he responds this way. Okay? So which do you think the author had in mind here? Does Boaz follow Ruth's instruction because he's a great man, a uniquely righteous man, or because he's a man, and men follow women's instructions or expectations?
I think the first time I read it, it was the it was because of Boaz that things went the way they did, not because of Ruth.
Yeah.
But I'm reconsidering that.
Look, that's a great point, because the critical question here is, who is the lead character? Like, who determines how the story will proceed? Okay, is in chapter 3. Is Boaz in charge of the course of action in the story, or is Ruth? Okay, so you're right that the question here is, who's the hero of the story? I mean, hero not as a Thor, but hero as the leading character who is shaping the narrative, and the lead character. So who do you think in chapter 3 is who's the lead character here? Is it Boaz?
I thought it was Boaz.
Yeah.
Reconsidering. I think there's a strong case that can be made for Ruth, and the book's entitled Ruth.
Yeah, look. I guess I'm with you, because it's. I wouldn't have considered myself ambivalent, but you're right. It can be. It's hard to determine who is the more active character between Boaz and Ruth. In chapter 3, definitely. Okay, so who's the most? It's hard to see. It's hard to determine unequivocally who's the dominant character that sets the tone for how the relationship will develop and how the story will progress to a successful and happy ending. Okay, because chapter 1, Ruth is definitely the lead character. Okay? Her decisions determine the course of the drama. But after she meets Boaz, look, Boaz is the active character in the daytime. Okay? In chapter 2, Boaz takes the lead in shaping the relationship with Ruth and moving it forward. He's the one who determines where she's going to collect, and how she's going to collect, and how she'll be treated, whether she'll eat, etc. But at night, okay, so chapter 1 is Ruth in the lead. Chapter 2, Boaz is the lead character. At night, in chapter 3, I would have. It seems to me that Ruth is the lead character, because she is the one who is speaking, and he is responding to her speech, and she's the one making the decisions, and he is acquiescing. But that assumes that, again, the way I understand the story in chapter 3 is that Boaz is a man responding to a woman, again, asking him for this. Look, Ruth is asking him for something. Okay? She could ask him for sex, or she could ask him for marriage. Okay? And Boaz is responding. If she asked him for sex, he would have given it to her. If she asked him for marriage, he's giving it to her. Okay? So that's how I saw it. But it is true that, I mean, you're right, in the contrary scenario, it could be that Ruth sensed the kind of person he is, and that he would respond to this, that Boaz is not a regular man. He's not like you and me. Okay, in which case, Ruth's conduct is determined by Boaz's unique virtue. Okay, but
I think in the TV screen, how he woke up and what his initial expression was when he saw this woman at his feet would have told you.
Yeah,
It
look,
would have been very telling.
right. It is true that when I imagine this scene, when I read this scene, I have him waking up, kind of, who are you? Like half asleep, befuddled, rather than. But you're right. It could be. Who are you? This is indecent. It could be. I've always imagined it as a quizzical question by a guy who wakes up half drunk. But anyway, so again, to me, chapter 3 has, I have Ruth in the lead simply because she is, again, she's doing all the actions, and she's the lead role, she has the leading role in the conversation, and she gets her way. Okay, so I kind of conceive of her as the leading character, which means that in terms of that relationship question, the answer is that Boaz is not a unique man, but a man. Okay? And then in chapter 4, obviously Boaz is in charge. In fact, Ruth doesn't even have a speaking role there. Boaz does all the actions. Okay, so it seems, again, in terms of the structure of the book, chapter 1 is Ruth, chapter 2 is Boaz, chapter 3 is Ruth, chapter 4 is Boaz. To me, the way I read chapter 3.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
So one other peculiarity that stuck out to me is if Boaz is an old man, why isn't he married?
I'm assuming he is married.
Okay, so this would be a concubine or a second
Or
wife.
just, multiple wives. Yeah. I always assumed he was married.
Okay.
Okay, so it is a question here, who gets credit for Boaz's honorable act? Does he get credit for being a great man, or does Ruth get credit for setting a high standard for him? But, okay, so let's, and it relates to, again, you've identified correctly that the answer to this question is who's the leading character in chapter 3. So let's wrap this up with the happy ending. In the bedroom scene, or bedside scene, we see again what we discussed at the beginning, that all the characters in the story are remarkably kind and considerate and dignified. Okay, you can go scene by scene and see how each character in this book thinks of the welfare and the dignity of the other person. Okay. Ruth and Naomi, Naomi and Ruth, Naomi thinking of the Ruth thinking of the welfare of Naomi, Naomi thinking of the welfare of Ruth, Boaz thinking of the welfare of Ruth in the field, definitely, and again, kind of giving her charity in public, in the open, and then giving her charity in secret. Boaz, again, being considerate of Ruth at his bedside, and again, being considerate of her when he gives her the wheat the morning after, at dawn, so that people won't want, when they see her walking out, they won't wonder and gossip about what she was doing here in the barn, because if she walks home with grain in her pouch, they'll think that she was gathering early in the morning, rather than sleeping here with who knows who overnight. And on top of that, Boaz also expresses concern for Naomi and his welfare. So take this to Naomi and inquire for her, whatever. And you can see it especially in that bedroom scene when they discuss their marriage. Okay, because Boaz thanks, so she asks him to please marry me, and Boaz thanks her for her willingness to marry him. And again, on top of that, Boaz also expresses concern for Naomi and his welfare. So take this to Naomi and inquire for her, whatever. And you can see it especially in that bedroom scene when they discuss their marriage. Okay, because Boaz thanks she asks him to please marry me, and Boaz thanks her for her willingness to marry him. to join my family. Okay, so she asks him to do her a kindness, to save her, and he presents it as her doing him a favor and saving him. Okay, so again, kind of like that giving in secret that he did in the daytime, he does it here again. He makes sure that she doesn't feel like a supplicant, like she's the beneficiary of a charity. He says, no, you're doing me a favor by marrying me. And in this respect, you can see also him doing her a great kindness when he tells her, again, in bed, that there's actually another man that has dibs on her. And because again, he could have kept it a secret. He could have kept his mouth shut and slept with her right there and then. But that would ruin her marriage prospects. Okay, so he does the right thing and tell her that actually you might belong to another man. Okay? Which again, I think speaks against the idea that they had sex in after the legal talk. Okay? And this thing with the other men sets up the legal wrangling in chapter 4. And here Boaz is not kind and considerate of this other man. He instead tricks him to get Ruth for himself. Okay, so that he, Boaz, can follow Ruth's instructions and redeem her. That Boaz will be her husband, not this other man. Okay, and again, the way he does it here is very clever and very energetic. Again, that's why he's clearly the leading character in chapter 4. Boaz makes sure to gather witnesses in advance, and then he sits there at the town gate waiting to accidentally, quote unquote, run into this other redeemer. Okay? And he grabs him and he tells him, hey, Naomi's husband left this field, or sold this field that can be redeemed, and you, because you're the next of kin, you have dibs on it. But if you don't want to redeem, just say so and I'll step in and redeem it for you. Okay? And the man says, yes, I'll be glad to redeem. And then Boaz says, oh, great. And by the way, with this field comes this woman. The widow of the deceased, Ruth, a Moabite, by the way. Okay? So immediately the man kind of senses, okay, this is a trap, and backs out. Okay, so here's a field, here's an attractive thing. Oh, and you get this woman with it. Oop. He backs out. He says, no, I can't do it because of that. And Boaz then pounces. He says, okay then, I'll step in. I'm next in line. And immediately he finalizes all the legal proceedings right there and then, the city gate. And all the witnesses, again, are pre-convened for it as witnesses. And that's it. He takes the field, takes Ruth as a wife, signed, sealed, done, gone. Okay, so he kind of cleverly, like a fishmonger or like a tradesman at the market, he offers the woman. If he had offered the woman first, maybe the man would have been interested in her. Okay, but Boaz pretended to use the field as bait for some lemon of a woman. Okay, when in fact we know the opposite. We know that the real prize, as far as Boaz is concerned, is the woman, not the field. Okay. Any case, and that's so Boaz so we know him as a good man, and now we know him also as a very shrewd and clever man. And with that, the story is resolved. Okay, the two widows have found a home, a protector, a provider, a son to take care of them in their old age and continue their line. And this brings the reader back to the question of who cares? Who cares about some pastoral love affair in ancient Judea? Okay. And the answer as to why this story is even in the Bible is written plainly in chapter in verse 17 in chapter 4. Okay, it says, and this child, Oved, who was born, Ruth's and Boaz's son, is in fact the father of Jesse, who is the father of David. Okay, so we're told, okay, so the child was born, happy day, and moving forward, he will be the father of Jesse, who will be the father of David. But then, after verse 17, all of a sudden, so there's this forward-looking lineage, and then there's all of a sudden this really backward, this long back-looking lineage, going back in time, and giving us the lineage leading from Peretz to Chetzron, to Ram, to Aminadav, to Nachshon, to Shalmon, to Boaz, to Oved, to Jesse, to David. What is that? Like, we already have the King David connection. Why then all of a sudden go back to Peretz, multiple generations, to come back to Boaz?
Connect David to Judah?
Yeah, but look, we already know that David was from the tribe of Judah.
But
everyone in the tribe of Judah is connected to Judah, right?
Right.
And it doesn't go all the way back to Judah even.
Yeah, that's the weird part. It was Perez.
I told you before, because we skipped all the genealogies. Like in Esau gets a whole chapter.
Yeah,
Ishmael,
it's messy.
we skipped them. And almost all of us do, and you and I did. But they are extremely important in revealing to biblical scholars, and probably to the original readers of the Bible, that these genealogies are there because they really do tell us something important, various things that are important about relationships. I mean, between families or tribes or nations, etc. So look, take a look at verses 11-12. Okay, when Ruth and Boaz marry, and the people and the elders of Judah or Bethlehem congratulate them and bless them.
It says, may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both whom built up the house of Israel, prosper in Ephrathah.
In Ephrata, yeah.
And perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may her house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah,
right.
through the offspring.
Yeah. Okay. So now, okay, so Peretz here, Peretz before the mention of King David, Peretz after the mention of King David. Okay, so now we understand why the book ends with a backward-looking genealogy stretching from Peretz to Boaz to David. Because the elders raised the Peretz reference in reference to Boaz's marriage with Ruth. Okay, so we're therefore so because the elders mentioned Peretz, we, the readers, are now informed of the line connecting Peretz to Boaz. Okay, so the question is, why did the elders, meaning why did the author, but why did the elders bring up Peretz of all people? Okay, the author clearly has a particular purpose here. Okay, he's inserted this odd blessing, may be like the house of Peretz, and the backward-looking genealogy for us to see and to notice. Okay, the elders are telling Boaz, and the author is telling you and me, that this story is like that story. Okay? Read this story in relationship to that story. Okay? So, what I want to do is to go and read that story, which you've already identified in Genesis 38, the story of Peretz. Okay, so I'll just read this translation that I have, just kind of quickly, because I want us to see all the details of that complicated story. Okay? And again, the author of Ruth is telling us, go read that story. Okay. So, that's not it. That's it. Now it came about at that time that Judah was demoted by his brothers, and he turned away until he came to the Adulamite man named Hira. And there Judah saw the daughter of a merchant named Shua, and he took her and came to her. And she conceived and bore a son, and he named him El. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she named him Onan. Once again she bore a son, and she named him Shelach. And Shelah. And Judah was in Chatziv when she gave birth to him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, named Tamar. Now Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. So Judah said to Onan, come to your brother's wife and perform the rite of the levirate, again, marry her, and raise up progeny for your brother, for your dead brother. Now Onan knew the progeny would not be his. Again, the first son is named after the dead brother. And if it came about, if he came to his brother's widow, then he would waste his seed on the ground. Okay. Okay, so this is the meaning of what you asked. Okay, so because Onan knew that the progeny from this union will not be his, if he came upon his brother's wife, and that would mean wasting his seed. See, in the English translation, they've added these commas to explain it. Okay. So Onan knew that the progeny would not be his, and it came about, but that's not okay. That's a wrong translation, because it's in Hebrew it says, and if he came to his brother's upon his brother's wife. So my translation is just incorrect here. So it could be, okay, so the two options to understand the spilling the seed on the ground is that since he knew that the child will not be his, if he had sex with his brother's wife, and he therefore would be spilling his seed on the ground. No? Okay, I don't get it. I don't understand, because he's clearly not marrying her. So look, I don't understand, because the Hebrew here is clear. It says, "V'haya im ba el eshet achiv," yeah? And if he had come to upon his brother's wife. Look, so maybe it is a marriage. Maybe he married her but didn't have sex with her. Perhaps.
Or at least not the kind where she could get pregnant.
Yeah. But it keeps saying, so I can't make out the Hebrew here. But never mind, okay, but clearly something happened here in this respect. And what he did was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and he put him to death as well. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For, he said, lest he too dies like his brothers. So Tamar went, and she remained in her father's house. Many days passed, and Shua's daughter, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was consoled, and he went up to watch over his sheep shearers, he and Hira, his Adulamite friend, to Timnah. Okay, so they went to Timnah. And it was told to Tamar, saying, "Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's garb, covered her head with a veil, and covered her face. And she went down, and sat down at the crossroads that were on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up, but as for her, she was not given to him as a wife. Okay? So Judah said, just wait until Shelah is of age, and here he is, he's of age, but Judah still hasn't made him marry her. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face with a veil. So he turned aside toward her to the road, and he said, "Get ready now, I will come to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give me that you should come to me?" And he said, "I will send a kid, a goat, from the herd." And she said, "Only if you give me a pledge until you send it." So basically she's asking for collateral. Okay? She said, the payment will be a kid, a goat, but I don't have it now. So she said, "Give me collateral for that goat." So he said, "What is the pledge that I should give you?" And she said, "Your signet, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her, and he came to her, and she conceived his likeness. She conceived a child from him. Then she arose and went away, and she took off her veil, and she donned her widow's garb again. And Judah sent a kid by the hand of his Adullamite friend to take the pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. So he asked the people of the place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way?" And they said, "No harlot was here." So she returned to Judah. So he returned, the Adullamite, returned to Judah, and he said, "I have not found her." And the people of the place also said, "No harlot was here." So Judah said, "Let her take them for herself," the stuff he gave her, "lest we become a laughingstock. Behold, I sent this kid, but you did not find her." Now it came after nearly 3 months that it was told to Judah, saying, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she's," not that harlot, but she, zanta, basically that she's been sleeping around. So, your daughter-in-law Tamar has been sleeping around, and behold, she is pregnant from this harlotry. So Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burnt." We were speaking earlier about the harsh penalties for having a reputation. She was taken out, and she sent for her father-in-law, saying, "From the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please recognize whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these." Then Judah recognized them as his own, and he said, "She is right. It is from me, because I did not give her to my son Shelah." But he no longer continued to be intimate with her. So it says he no longer slept with her after this. And it came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. And it came about when she gave birth that he, the infant, stretched out his hand. So the midwife, okay, it doesn't matter here. This is how one of the kids get named Peretz. Okay, so one brother is Peretz, the other is Zerach. Okay. So both of these. So again, the author tells us this story is like Peretz. Okay, and the genealogy stretches back to Peretz. And indeed, both stories have a daughter-in-law who is widowed and childless, which threatens to end the deceased husband's line and name. In both stories, the first eligible redeemer of the widow declines to redeem the poor woman. Okay? So another male relative, a farther male relative, in this case Boaz, in that case Judah, steps in to do this, to do the redeeming. And in both stories, the widow is redeemed by her own initiative. Okay, the men, Boaz and Judah, are responding to the pressure or to the entreaties of the woman. Okay, they're either reluctant or passive. Okay, so the woman is the one who takes aggressive sexual or not sexual action, but takes the lead in making the man do his duty. And both stories, of course, end the same way, happily with the widow redeemed and producing a son. Now, with the parrot's blessing and the parrot's lineage, okay, the blessing that the elders give to or bless Boaz and Ruth, and then the lineage, the backward lineage that the author gives us all the way back to Peretz, the author is telling us to connect these two stories. You know, to understand this, or he's telling us to understand the story of Ruth in context of the story of Judah and Tamar and Peretz. And thanks to this, okay, so now you and I finally understand where Naomi got this sexy idea of getting Boaz to sleep with Ruth in order to force him to marry her, or to get him to marry her. Okay, Naomi saw Ruth's situation as similar to Tamar, and therefore she adopted Tamar's successful plan. And this is why I said it might be that the elders saw this as well. Okay, that they drew the connection between Ruth and Tamar. Okay, between Boaz and Judah. Okay, so what's left unclear, and then we'll end with this, is whether the blessing that the elders give them is a sincere blessing of praise for Ruth and Boaz, or whether it's a kind of a veiled critique on the part of the elders. Is it? Do you think it's possible that maybe the elders are not kind of applauding, but that they think that maybe Ruth was not the most chaste woman in the tribe? That maybe Ruth was being a kind of a Tamar, or that maybe that Boaz, like Judah, had to be tricked in the sack to do the right thing and marry this widow, that he's marrying her because he had sex with her. Okay, do you see what I mean? Are they applauding Ruth and Boaz, or are they pointing out that this is a kind of a dirty story and unchaste story, like the story of Judah and Tamar?
Nobody else is compared like this, going back to Perez, and may your house be like the house of Perez.
Yeah.
And you were saying that there was commentary or stuff going on at the time that was questioning David's lineage to.
Well, so I've read that, but again, where do we get this? We get everyone who comments on David's lineage comes at a time when the book of Ruth is already in the Bible. Okay, so we know that David had Edomite, Moabite lineage, and that's why it calls our attention to that. Hey, what is that funny episode in Samuel with David going to the king of Moab to take care of his parents, and why these gods in Solomon's idolatry? Okay, so it makes us wonder that it makes us see. The book of Ruth makes us see that there are these kernels of Moabite lineage in David already hinted in Kings and in Samuel. And it creates this question that, so maybe David had some PR problems, and this is a solution. Okay, but it's impossible to take the book of Ruth out of the consciousness of commentators during the Greek and Roman period, or the medieval period. Okay, so the mere presence of the Book of Ruth gives rise to speculation that maybe this book is here for this reason. But going back to this question of whether they are lauded or if people are looking askance at them. If you think of the parallel story, of the Tamar and Judah story, as I just read it, who's being criticized here in the story of Tamar and Judah? Is Tamar being criticized? Is Judah being criticized? Who's the bad character or the dishonorable character?
Between Judah and Tamar, it seems like Judah.
Exactly. Okay. The Bible does not. The biblical author does not criticize Tamar. She's a desperate woman. Okay. The men in the story, Onan, the brother who won't do his duty, and the father who won't give her to the next brother, who doesn't do his duty as well. Okay, so there's this poor widow who is being wronged by these two men, by the brother and by the brother-in-law and by the father-in-law. Okay, so I don't know if we're supposed to think of Tamar as a heroine, because what she did, sex out of wedlock, is clearly not kosher. Okay, it's not chaste. Okay, but the Bible doesn't single her out for being loose or anything else. Clearly, the villains in the story, the people who are wrong and who are causing this terrible thing, are the two men, the brother-in-law and the father-in-law. And so again, maybe the author connects these two stories for us in such an explicit way. Again, the author is basically telling us it's such an odd blessing. May your house be like the house of Peretz. Right? Where does it even come from? It's not a blessing. It's not a common blessing. And then the genealogy going again, exactly what you said. It doesn't go back all the way to Judah to show, again, a connection to the patriarch, connection to Peretz. So the author is explicit in connecting these two stories for us. And maybe the purpose is to highlight the good character of both Ruth and Boaz. Okay, that Ruth is such a valiant woman. Boaz calls her an eshet chayil, valiant woman, a woman of great character. That Ruth is a true woman of great character, and Boaz is a real mensch, because they play the same roles as did Tamar and Judah, but they behave very differently. Okay? Ruth is as desperate, but she doesn't resort to sex out of wedlock to get what she needs. And Boaz, despite being a man with manly urges, does not have to be tricked with sex into redeeming this poor woman. Okay? He's better than Judah, and she's better than Tamar. Okay, so maybe that's the kind of, again, to me that would explain the backward genealogy and that odd blessing. Okay, connecting these two stories, and again to highlight, to flip what is a blemish on David's character, or on David, to flip it and show, Ruth is not, this Moabite lineage that David has is not a problem. It's a point in his favor, because she's such a eshet chayil. All right. Any questions about Ruth that we haven't covered, that you might have in reading this?
No. No.
Yeah. Okay, so next time we will we'll meet for the last time, discuss the book of Job. It's the only so up till now, well, we focused on the stories, and Job is not a story. I mean, it's a story, but it's full of very long speeches. So I'll send you the. It's a very long book, so I'll just send you the chapters. Kind of. It's still going to be a lot of chapters, but I'm trying to capture the important part of the different speeches, and I'll also send you a little explanation of the Satan character, because we have a certain image of Satan based on our medieval or classical and medieval conception of the devil, which is definitely not biblical. So the Satan in Job is not the Satan that you and I have in our minds. So I'll send you that in the reading assignment, and we'll meet next week.
Is there any way we can push it off 1 week? I just know next week I got a paper due on Sunday night.
Definitely. Yeah. So week after next.
Week after next would be perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Sure thing. I'll see you then.
All right, see you then. Have a good weekend.
You too. Good night.